Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome into Morning in the Valley. I'm Jeff Bidwell. We've got Kevin Lehman, the television analyst, Missouri Valley Conference Basketball Network, will be with us today. Almost leaning towards calling him the voice of the Missouri Valley Conference basketball. You hear him on so many games, whether it's on the MVC network, whether it's any of the ESPN networks. If there's a big Valley game, Kevin Lehman is in the house. So we're going to talk with him, get some late May thoughts on how the Valley is shaping up as we head into the 25-26 season. Now just about a week away before everybody appears for summer workouts on both the men's and the women's side, ready to get rolling here for next season. If you have not done so already, would certainly appreciate it. Head on over to YouTube and search out Morning in the Valley. Subscribe to our page there. Share it, like it, comment on it. Only the good stuff. Unless I need to be checked somewhere, then feel free to check away. But that'll help this program get out in front of more eyeballs. And when you subscribe on YouTube, you'll get a little notification bell every time we go live. And of course, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in the off season, we're here at 9 a.m. We get into the season. It's going to be much more frequent and maybe some odd times. So that little bell will help you catch us when we go live with the latest in the Missouri Valley Conference. All right, the last couple of days have been days of commitments, especially on the women's side, and looking ahead now to the 2026 season. You come out of the season in March, and it's a fast and furious. Everybody's in the portal. You're trying to, who's leaving? Who can we get out of the portal? Trying to get your roster set for 25-26, but then that amount of time is pretty small, because then as soon as you get into April, now you're on the road trying to get kids to come to be part of your 26-27 team and moving forward. And we've seen a bunch of kids commit in the last couple of days for several women's teams. We're going to start in Des Moines, Iowa, where Coach Allison Pullman has gotten a commitment from Alex Couch. She is a 5'10" guard out of Liberty, Missouri, about 2.5 hours down the road rather, from Des Moines. She was a Class 6 All-State player as a junior, as voted on by the Missouri Basketball Coaches Association. Going back and sort of looking to see where Alex, what her offer list was, and, from teams, Murray State, Bradley, Illinois State from within the conference, obviously, along with Drake, Wichita State, Oakland, SIU, Edwardsville, also getting on board there. The part that stuck out to me was that Allison Pullman and her staff originally offered Alex Couch on June the 8th, 2023. I mean, so this has been a 2-year journey for Drake and for Couch to eventually meet up here and get to a commitment. And I was struck with it again. There's just so many differences in the men's and women's games. I sat yesterday and listened in with Murray State men's coach Ryan Miller was speaking at a local Kiwanis Club meeting and giving a little bit of the State of the Union and an introductory speech. And part of the discussion came down to recruiting and sort of recruiting in this NIL world. And he said, there are coaches certainly that appreciate the speed dating aspect of NIL, where, look, we are going to go hard for 3 weeks, and we are going to do everything we can to bring you in and try to make sure this fits. But also, the other part of that is the stress on your staff is you have to do all this background work, all this, private investigative work, as Ryan Miller said yesterday, about trying to get into these kids, into their backgrounds, into their families, because they're coming to your program and you want to make sure they are a good fit. And speed dating sometimes can be surface, because he said it's frustrating, obviously, when you get these kids as sophomores and it's a 3-year recruiting process. And then at the end of the day, they're like, well, I'm going somewhere else. And it's like, oh, that's just a lot of man hours that didn't work out. But On the women's side, that part of the game is still alive and well. And that is, Alex Couch getting an offer 2 years ago and ultimately being able to get to the finish line here with Drake. Excuse me. All right. In Evansville, Robin Shore picking up a commitment. And this is sort of the opposite of that, as Casey O'Connell from Fort Myers, Florida. She has committed to the Aces. She got an offer from Evansville on May the 2nd. So it took 3 weeks as opposed to 2 years with Alex Couch, just 2 weeks. Evansville was her first Division I offer 3 weeks ago, and she hopped right on it and committed to that. 6-foot power forward out of Fort Myers, Florida, averaged 16.7 rebounds a game last year as a junior for her high school program. And so bringing some size to Robin Shore and Evansville. At Murray State, Rochelle Turner has picked up a commitment from a 2026 guard by the name of Mary Grant. She is a 5'8" guard from Kansas. She had offers from inside the Missouri Valley, from Bradley and from Evansville, a second team all-state guard in Kansas. The way they're at least this one publication that put out their all-state teams, 15 kids, first, second, and third teams. There was only 6 non-seniors on those all-state teams, and Mary Grant was one of them. So a kid that has a fast release, can shoot the heck out of the basketball, and seems like that perfect fit going into Rochelle Turner's up-tempo system there at Murray State. Back to Evansville, from the commitment world to the signing world, and these are kids we are going to see imminently in a Purple Aces uniform, as Evansville announced the signing of 3 players, all with international ties to varying degrees. Most recently, starting, we'll go right to left. Georgia Cox there from Australia. She had been at Eastern Illinois, had a redshirt season last year as a redshirt freshman, played 18 games up at EIU, averaged about 2.5 points, a little less than a rebound per game in those 18 games, but 3 years of eligibility left, and she is 6'4". So you are going to bet on the size and the potential there that Robin Shore and her staff are going to be able to unlock Georgia and try to get the most out of her. Not a lot of 6'4" wandering around the valley. There's a lot of 6'1", 6'2s, but you get 6'4", that can be a difference maker if they were able to get her acclimated to the Missouri Valley and have her be an impactful big. In the middle there, Daniela Llavero, a 5'5" guard out of Spain. She will be a freshman, played at multiple clubs, multiple levels there in Spain, but another one of these international kids coming over. Again, she'll be a freshman here with Evansville. And then we told you about this other commitment from Australia, Yelena Savic, a 5'11" wing. Again, another freshman, played club basketball down there in Australia. So tapping into the international flavor is Robin Shore with her 2025-26 roster there at Evansville. All right. We had some coaching news, some coaching changes, and we are going to get to the coaching changes in just a minute because our guest has joined us. As I said at the top of the show, when there is a big Missouri Valley Conference basketball game, you are going to find Kevin Lehman on the call. And so by proxy, I'm going to assume this is a big edition of Morning in the Valley today because Kevin Lehman joins us now. Sir, good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Jeff. Thanks for having me on. I usually kind of put basketball in the background in May, but you've made me kind of sit down and think about the Valley, who's returning, the new coaches, and everything else that's going on in the Valley. I love talking basketball any time of the year.
Well, it is certainly a year-round deal now, more than ever. Before we get into the Valley, briefly about your background, as I was doing my quick homework, a bachelor's degree in psychology. Did that better impact you as a parent or better impact you as a basketball coach?
I think in both those areas. And also, I combined that. My master's degree from Drake was in had to do with physical education, but I was in human motor performance. So I was really into the aspect of psychological performance, preparation for athletes. So I think that really helped me in my coaching career, and it also helps me in my broadcasting career in some aspects.
What's been the story of the offseason for you? I know you've put it aside a little bit, but here the last 2 months, a lot of comings and goings, coaches, players, and so on. What has been the story for you here in the last 2 months?
Well, I think we're all waiting for the House settlement to come through and see what that's going to do. Squad limits, how that's going to affect some of our Olympic sports, and how schools like those in the Valley that are in the mid-major that have budget issues, how they're going to be able to maneuver through this new landscape that's coming down the pike. And so, and what's going to happen with mid-majors? I just seeing more and more of this structure is being pushed for the major conferences to not only create the income for themselves, but also for their sports programs. And so how do the great leagues like the Valley survive in this new landscape?
There has been change at the top for the second year in a row as Ben McCollum moved on to Iowa, and Eric Henderson comes down from South Dakota State. This is a program that has been to the NCAA tournament 3 years in a row. Darren DeVries rolling right into Ben McCollum, now into Eric Henderson. Obviously, Coach McCollum didn't skip a beat last year, winning 30 games and getting to the tournament. Where is your optimism that, look, 30 games may be a bar too far for anybody to think about in May, but where's your optimism that Coach Henderson can keep things rolling there in Des Moines?
Well, there's a really alignment, I think, at Drake with the president, Marty Murray, who is a Kentucky grad, who was at Gonzaga, and their AD and Brian Harden, who understands the landscape. So and the alignment with their head coaches, they're all on the same page, so to speak. I think that's why Drake has had so much success because, I watched Drake go through the down years. Like I said, I have a master's degree from there. I was at Dowling High School. Actually taught Caitlin Clark's mother U.S. history. So she does know her presidents. I'm well aware of that. And I picked up my master's at Drake. So I followed that program a lot, really close to a lot of former basketball players there. And Eric Henderson, I actually recruited him when I was the head coach in Omaha. He came out of Eastern Iowa, Macoka Valley, ended up playing for Greg McDermott at Wayne State. There's a lot of connections here because I coached Greg at Northern Iowa. He helped get me in the broadcasting when he took the job at Iowa State. And now we have Ryan Miller coming in off his staff. But if you look at Drake, they've got a former head coach at Minnesota, Nico Medved, former head coach at Indiana, Darren DeVries, and now one at Iowa. So they've got 3 Big Ten head coaches that have come through that program.
It's really become sort of the cradle of coaches here in the last 15 years or so. For a first-year head coach in this league, and you've got experience from the media side as an assistant back at Northern Iowa a couple decades ago, for a first-year coach in this league, whether it is Eric Henderson, whether it is Ryan Miller coming from Creighton now at Murray State, what is the best piece of advice you can give these first-timers about trying to acclimate to this great league?
Well, I'm in a different world now than when I coached because of this transfer portal. But I think it comes down to establishing your program, setting your culture. You have to recruit the right people that are going to understand what you're about and your culture is about. And I see Ryan Miller's doing that he's bringing in 2 guys from Creighton that have an experience with him that understands probably the process that they're going to go through. So I think that's so important. And you also, I think, to be successful, not only at the Valley, but all levels, Jeff, you have to don't forget to recruit your high school guys and try to retain them and then fill in the spots with your transfer portal. Now, it's difficult for Ryan Miller to come in with a cupboard bare, a roster bare to do that. But I think that if you look at the successful teams in this league, that you look at Brian Wardle at Bradley, what he's done, Ben Jacobson, 20th year he's starting at Northern Iowa. That's been their formula for success, is establishing that culture, keeping people in the program, then adding in where your needs are at.
In this NIL era, and I know so much of the NIL process is player acquisition. But as we have seen over years and decades, when teams at our level have success, and especially can get into the tournament and have success, it's teams with guys that have been together for years and years and get old, stay old, all of that stuff. Would you, if you're consulting coaches around the country at this level, would you consider it maybe more important to use the NIL money that you can get and whatever, obviously the numbers are growing with the house settlement and so on, hopefully, but as a means of retention, as opposed to let's go get new guys?
Yeah, I think that's a great observation, Jeff. When I talked to TJ Otzelberg at Iowa State, they really make an effort to use their NIL money to keep the players that they have in their program. And if you look at his formula, he calls it Moneyball recruiting. They are not necessarily taking high major guys transfer over. They're looking for the mid-major hungry players, and they may be a little less expensive on that NIL market also. But that's their formula for success at Iowa State. And I live just near Iowa City, so I'm very familiar with what's happening at Drake, Northern Iowa, Iowa State, and Iowa. I do have connections with all four of those schools through some way or another. I'm the chameleon in the state because I grew up in Iowa City, have actually got a teaching certificate at Iowa, master's from Drake, coached at Northern Iowa, and I cut my teeth doing broadcast at Iowa State. So I'm fairly close with all those. But to answer your question, I think that is and that also helps establish your culture. I think you see Greg McDermott do that at Creighton, so Ryan Miller's familiar with how that situation works, that you got to keep your culture, and I think getting old is harder now.
Right.
And maybe you do that by recruiting the right people, upperclassmen, through the transfer portal, but it's so important to have those freshmen that become sophomores, become junior. It's the old Bob Knight axiom. The best thing about freshmen is they become sophomores.
You're not going to keep all of them, but boy, if you can keep some of them, and it just does. It's a different way, I think, of looking through the prism, but you can get those guys, those second and third years. Look out. Speaking of retention, I don't think there's any school. There's two really, and we'll get to both of them. But first, the one that kind of made the big noise early was Illinois State and bringing everybody back. But maybe most importantly, two all-league guys in Chase Walker and Johnny Kinzinger. Now, the half glass empty look at that is, look, man, they went 10-10 in the conference. How excited should we be about a team that's coming back that was a fifth place team in the Valley last year? But there's a lot of optimism, and I feel like for very good reason around them. Where are you at with them right now here on May the 23rd?
Well, as I drove back from St. Louis at the end of Arch Madness, Josh Betts and I always go down there, and we were going through the lineups right there, rating if we were going to rank teams in a preseason poll on that day. And Illinois State popped to the top for us because of what you're saying. And I just looked at their roster. They returned 5 of their top 7 scorers. So the idea of getting old, having experience, understanding the culture of your program, and they made a nice run in postseason with that CBI championships, and the ability to keep Chase Walker there, Johnny Kinzinger there, and some outstanding freshmen. And he's got a couple guys sitting out. The transfer from, I think it was North Dakota State, was hurt last year. His name escapes me right now. Then Lee, the 7-footer transfer from Illinois, will be healthy. So there are some other people in that program. Brian Skunberg, I think, is the name. Remember that name. He really was going to be a factor from this year before getting hurt. So they've got some guys sitting out that are going to help them also. I think if I'm going to vote today and we still have action in the portal, I would put Illinois State at number 1 in the preseason poll for the Valley.
How much do you put into March momentum going into the summer and them play? I mean, we had Ryan Peden on, last month. He was like, there was no discussion of, are we going to play in the postseason or not? We were absolutely going in. We got into the CBI. Let's go try to win the thing. And then they do. How much of that positive momentum and snowballing do you think can help springboard a team, 6 months from now?
Oh, I think it's huge. I think there's 2 ways to motivate your team. You have success like that, which Ryan is. And I watched his program when he came in, and I thought, this guy's, he understands what he's doing. It's going to take a little bit longer. 4th year now. They've had success. And as I said, probably a lot of people's pick for preseason poll. But I think he's done it the right way, establishing that culture, getting people that fit. Leadership is huge. But the momentum going into the summer is so big now because you're allowed to be with your players like 11 months a year. The summer workouts, the team workouts are huge. So to have that positive momentum, I think that comes back to what you talked about: leadership, people in your program, the culture really springboards you. But the other thing you have to worry about, I think, in today's age of college basketball, you have so much hands-on with your players, is you have to walk that line so you don't have burnout because they're around you so much. in this day and age as far as individual workouts and team workouts.
The other team that has a ton of retention and the other all-league player coming back is Northern Iowa. And Trey Campbell is back to lead that team. You know, he last year, points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks, all career highs for him. I feel like in a lot of ways, for a guy that has started 96 out of 98 games in 3 years in Northern Iowa, he's kind of been in the shadows a little bit just because Titan Anderson was such a force of nature there at UNI. But it's Trey Campbell's time to be the guy. How do you think, for as much as you're around that team, how do you think he is prepared to step into that role where he is now number one with a bullet on everybody's scouting report?
I tell you, Titan Anderson was such a great leader. Those are big shoes to fill. But what I remember when Trey Campbell came in as a freshman, I thought this guy is going to be a all-league player in this league as he matures and gets more experience. I thought he played at a first-team level through a lot of parts of this last season. Ended up being a second-team pick. But if you look at Northern Iowa, I hate to do reverse on this, but when the games they lost, he didn't score well. When he was scoring big and shooting really well from the perimeter, those were games that they won easily. So I think he was a big piece. You mentioned he was kind of behind Hudson and Anderson in that lineup and kind of a forgotten guy, but I thought he was such a huge piece. At 6'4", he can guard perimeter. I think his goal last year was to be an all-defensive player. Didn't make it. I'm sure that's going to be the goal again this year that Ben Jacobson sets for him. But if you look at the rest of the lineup, they've got like 5 or 6 guys with starting experience. You know, Ben Schweiger came in and started with the injury to Leon Bond, and they've got R.J. Taylor coming back off the Achilles tear. Will Hornseth didn't make all freshman team. I thought he played at that level. This is a team that's got some talent and some real experience, and they've added some new pieces through the portal. I haven't seen these guys yet. I kind of do my tour in September, October to see all these new faces, Jeff, and it's kind of hard to see reading on paper what type of impact the portal players have until I see them in person.
Well, the dirty little secret about a lot of this is until they show up on campus, doesn't matter what they've signed, they're not really with you yet because we've seen some 11th hour shenanigans at times.
Yes.
Guys,
yeah, there's a lot of summer left. A lot of the portal, a lot of movement will still be happening. I see that even like Iowa signed a guy today, Ben McCollum at Iowa. So it's an ongoing fluid situation.
Ben McCollum obviously had the most success last year as a first-year head coach in the Valley. We'll take him off the board. But of Rob Eson at UIC and Matthew Graves at Indiana State, Scott Nagy at Southern Illinois, none of those guys were first-time head coaches. And Graves certainly had some time in the Valley working under Josh Schertz there at Indiana State. But which of those 3 coaches do you felt like sort of acclimated best to being – sliding over one chair and being the guy on the sidelines in this league last year?
Well, I've known Scott Nagy. You know, I coached against him when I was in Omaha, in the old North Central League when he's at South Dakota State. We actually came in the league together. We were kind of rehashing those old moments in that, and that was a great Division II league. I mean, you had to have Division I players in that league. So I think he's got the resume that he's going to build a program that's going to be really solid there at Southern Illinois. And of course, they have, like Murray State, tremendous tradition at Southern Illinois. And I was looking through these coaches. We have 5 coaches in this league that's going to enter their first or second year. That's almost half the league, and that's amazing. Then you look at the guys that are older. Jacobson is going to be his 20th year, Wardle in his 11th. You know, Casey Alexander starting number 7 at Belmont. So you've got a real division there between coaches that have been here, been in the league, and the new coaches trying to cut their teeth in this league.
When you look at recruiting in this era, it's sort of there's certainly 2 paths to take, and in sort of the speed dating aspect in a lot of recruiting now in that March and April window. And, you know, I talked with Scott Nagy a couple weeks ago, and he's like, you know, look, not that he's clinging to the old days, but he's like, man, I liked it more when you had, you know, you spend a couple of years and you know these guys inside and out and you build relationships. And then, you know, Ryan Miller yesterday speaking, saying, look, you know, I'd rather just go hard for 3 weeks and you get him or you don't, but you don't spend 3 years hunting a kid down. And then at the end, he goes, I'm going somewhere else. As the old coach from all those years on the trail, which do you see the value in both? And which one would you prefer nowadays?
Well, I think I'm kind of the old school where you develop a relationship with a player and they want to be at your school for not only the basketball, but with the environment there, the culture there. To get a degree from your school, that's no longer. Ben Jacobson made a great comment to me the other day. We were actually attending a funeral of Jersey Jeremiah, associate AD at Northern Iowa, was a big influence on my life, Greg McDermott's life, a lot of people. But Ben's comment was, my son switched AU teams, and a number of players switched high school teams. So this portal and movement for players is commonplace for them. And us get off our lawn guys like myself. We were all about, you made a commitment, you stayed and you stuck it out. So this is a different era that you're dealing with players, because they're just part of their life is constant movement and switching, whether it's high schools, AU teams. So to switch in college is not a big thing for them. So I think it's just the way of the land right now that you got to get used to it and you got to be able to do it. And like you said, Jeff, it is speed dating. No question that you've got to evaluate people quickly. And a lot of times, well, you see what Ryan Miller is bringing in the guys that three guys that have some background in Creighton. So he knows them. He knows the family. He knows the personality. I think that's a huge benefit. A lot of times you recruit players, and Leon Bond's a great example at Northern Iowa. They recruit him the first time he goes to Virginia. They get him on the bounce back. So a lot of times you're familiar with those players. When they hit the portal, hey, it's a simple phone call. The recruiting process started years ago. So you have a great amount of awareness and some connectivity with those players.
It has been 4 years since the Valley had more than one team in. And I know this has been a lot of, I don't know if hand wringing is the right phrase, but they're working on it in the league office and Commissioner Jackson trying to put in some scheduling principles, trying to bolster everybody's resume. But it hasn't worked yet. And we've had some near misses with Indiana State 2 years ago. Drake, if they don't beat Bradley on Sunday, I don't know. It would have been down to the wire with them. I'll give you the commissionership for 5 minutes. What is your advice or thought or angle here to help this league get back to being a multi? The days of four are long gone, but how can we get this to being consistently in the conversation for a 2-bid league every year?
Well, you have to look at the net. The net to me has created a class system in college basketball. So you have the haves and the have-nots. And, I always go back to my days at Northern Iowa. We had a home and home with the University of Iowa. We had a home and home with Iowa State. We had a home and home with Nebraska. That's unheard of today. And so today's world, I think you have to take I think Drake has set a good model for it. It takes some funds because you got to be able to get some buy games, some home and homes with some leagues that are top tier teams in the league that they're playing in to help with that net, because those days of going and getting even a neutral site game with a major conference team is very difficult to do today. So the cards are stacked against the Valley for getting back to multiple bids. But I think, Jeff Jackson has a good plan in place. It starts with scheduling. And I think some of those teams that have been at the bottom of the net, they have to really up their game, because once you get in the league, Jeff, you've got to be able to have some quad 2 opportunities when you get in the league play, and even hopefully some quad 1 opportunities when you go on the road. I think that'll be the key to success. But it starts with scheduling, and you can't be a mercenary and go on the road and play those Power 5 teams or major conference teams to collect the check. You've got to be able to schedule some home games to build up your own resume.
Last question. You tipped your hand with Illinois State as your preseason pick here in late May. Who, without getting too into the weeds on everybody's roster, as you said at this point, but who's maybe somebody down from the pack a little bit that you might expect to be a little bit of a surprise?
That's so hard to say now because, as you said, there's such fluidity in these rosters right now. But, I think it's easier for me to say, okay, look at the established programs. Illinois State is getting to that level. As I mentioned, Jacobson started his 20th year, got a lot of players come back. Brian Wardle always seems to put a good team together. He's starting his 11th year. And Casey Alexander, I think if you put Belmont in the second half in preseason polls, you're making a mistake. Somehow they always able to get it done. But I'm really interested. I've been following all the players that Ryan Miller's been signing at Murray State. So I'm excited to see how that team comes together. A new coach, tough league, first time as a head coach, but it looks like he's put an excellent staff together. And now he's bringing the players in. So how will that transform? So to answer your question, I think it's really hard to find somebody because there's been so much movement of players leaving and graduating. And there's a couple guys that I'm sure they still have eligibility left or not because there's those appeals to get that fifth and sixth year. So it's really interesting to see how these rosters are going to shake out. Like I said, talk to me in September and October when I get out in those practice courts, and I'll be able to tell you a little bit more.
Well, I appreciate the time coming in here, and hopefully enjoy a little sunshine here in your downtime before I know it is hot and heavy travel season once we get into the fall and winter. Kevin Lehman, the voice of Missouri Valley Conference basketball television network, ESPN, wherever you can find him. Glad we could find him this morning. And Kevin, thanks for the time.
Jeff, hey, thanks so much for having me on. Always a pleasure to talk Valley basketball.
All right, thank you. There's Kevin Lehman. Said it is always you knew it was a big game. And one of my favorite moments with him last year was we were at I think we were at Drake. Murray State was at Drake, and Drake hadn't. I think they just lost to UIC. It was their first loss, and Murray State didn't really have any. You just felt like you're walking into a buzzsaw, and the game was over, and Kevin and his TV partner walked by, and they just were like, wow. And I was like, yeah, that was a wow. That was as good maybe as the Racers played all season long, being able to pick off Bennett Sturts and the boys there at Drake. But obviously Bulldogs went on to great success there the rest of the season. All right, a couple other news and notes before I get into a quick as we talked about scheduling, a little scheduling manifesto here. Indiana State head coach Matthew Graves looking for another assistant coach as Tim Johnson has left to go to Appalachian State. 1 year at Indiana State, but as we've said 1,000 times in this profession, it is a relationship business, and he is going to go work at App State with Dustin Kearns, head coach there. Those two worked together for 4 years at Wofford from 2013 to 2017. And then Justin Furr, of course, left several weeks ago as an assistant there at Indiana State. He's going to be a head coach at Division II Barry University. So some work here late for these moves are rarely surprises for head coaches, but still some infrastructure building that needs to be done for Coach Graves there at Terre Haute. One scheduling piece of note, our friends at the D1 docket showing that Southern Illinois has another road game. They're going to go to Richmond on December the 13th. And so SIU's schedule right now with games that we know, they're going to play at Nevada on November the 12th. They're going to play at North Dakota State November 17th, and they're going to Richmond on December the 13th. They have a return game to High Point with a date that is TBD at this point. Those are, when you look at, we're still waiting on, whatever amount of value you want to put to preseason computer metrics, especially in this era of movement. So take everything with a grain of salt, but Bart Torvik over barttorvik.com, his metrics and everything kind of works into the player movement and how teams are going to look and projecting forward. So, these games, he's got Nevada as one at 132 in his preseason rankings, Richmond 127, High Point 110, North Dakota State 246. But those are some relatively good possibilities there, especially on the road for SIU to go pick up some wins that you hope those teams take care of their business in the non-conference, and those can end up being quad 2 wins for the Salukis moving forward. All right, now it's time for manifesto time about scheduling. We've had some discourse around my Murray State parts here about the Racers going to the Cayman Island Classic and that event becoming a four-team event. It's Murray State, George Washington, McNeese, and Middle Tennessee. And the general discourse from some corners of the Racer Nation was, yawn as much as anything, just yawn. And as we have talked about we talked with Rocco Miller last week, in this era of big boys skipping out on MTEs. They're just going to Vegas and playing in these NIL events, or they're going to play in their own Power 4 MTEs. And so as Kevin alluded to there a few minutes ago, it is difficult now for mid majors to get high majors on a neutral floor because the big boys just aren't going to those events anymore. And so it is becoming a scheduling challenge. So we try not to let facts get in the way of a good story, but did a little digging last night. And so you have Drake is going to the Emerald Coast Classic in Destin. And that is a 4-team event that has LSU, DePaul, and Georgia Tech. Now, at first glance, you're like, okay, Drake is going to go play LSU, DePaul, and Georgia Tech. Murray State's playing George Washington, McNeese, and Middle Tennessee. Advantage Drake, right? Well, when you look at the net last year and you look at LSU, DePaul, and Georgia Tech, their average net last year was 106. When you look at George Washington, McNeese, and Middle Tennessee, their average net, 96. So, I mean, in theory, it is a better event for Murray State to go play in. Now, as we will say 1,000 times moving forward, past results do not lead to future performance. They just don't, especially in all of this movement and so on. Teams can be awful and make a huge leap. Teams can be awesome, and then they can take multi-steps back depending on who they lose. You're certainly maybe expecting that with McNeese after a couple great years with Will Wade. Who knows what's going to happen after he moves on to NC State. But the point that Rocco Miller made last week was, if you are going to put together an at-large resume, you have to go play the best teams available from the mid-majors around the country. If that is your scheduling thesis here in the summer. And that's the difference between football and basketball. Football, these schedules are plotted out sometimes 10 years in advance. Basketball, it's basically renewable every single season. So the question comes to, and as Jeff Jackson has said many times, scheduling is personal. So you have teams that are, why are they scheduling a certain way? Are they just is a coach trying to save his job and just schedule as many cupcakes in November and December as possible so he can get to 20 wins and maybe click something in his contract? Do you feel like you've got the goods where we can go schedule hard because our team is good, and if maybe things don't go right on Sunday in St. Louis, we can still get in? It's all part of the Rubik's Cube of scheduling. When you looked at, I looked last year at the top 100 teams in the net. If you take out the Power 4 teams and you take out the Big East, so the biggest 5 conferences, there were 30 teams in the net last year that were the top 100 that were non-Power 4, non-Big East. Of those teams, 14 of them have been in the top 100 the last 3 years. Gonzaga, St. Mary, VCU, Utah State, New Mexico, Boise, Memphis, San Diego State, Irvine, North Texas, Dayton, Yale, Nevada, and UNLV. On top of those teams, the last 3 years, there were 8 teams that averaged a top 100 net performance. Washington State, Colorado State, Liberty, San Francisco, George Mason, Grand Canyon, UAB, Florida Atlantic. Those are the teams that your team needs to go schedule. They have to go schedule those teams if you want to put yourself into a position. If you feel like your program is in a position to go get an at-large bid, those are the 22 teams you need to focus on. Some of them have. UIC hosted Yale last year, a top 100 team the last 3 years. They're going to play at Yale this year. Southern Illinois is going to Nevada, who's been a top 100 team the last 3 years. They've got a game at High Point, who was 83rd last season. Bradley and Drake are the only 2 Missouri Valley teams who have been in the top 100 the last 3 years. They are the only 2 teams that have averaged a top 100 net finish in the last 3 years. So those are the 2 I'm kind of looking at the most. That it's like, you guys have the pedigree of we're around the hoop here. What can we do to get across the finish line and get that at large if things don't go the way you want them to go in St. Louis? The part about scheduling that I think gets overlooked at times is you need two to tango. And Bradley, Drake, Indiana State, it doesn't matter who. You can all have scheduling thoughts, and this is what we want to do. But somebody's got to agree to that on the other side. And just because you want to go play hard, and just because you want to go play Utah State or VCU or San Francisco, they may not want to play you for any variety of reasons. And so that's always a complicating measure in all of this. Bradley right now, they are going to host Washington State as a return from a road game last year. Again, a top 100 team the last 3 years. They are scheduled to go to San Francisco, a top 100 team the last 3 years. And they are going to their MTE in Orlando, where they're going to have an opportunity to play Liberty, a top 100 team the last 3 years, and then UC San Diego, who was 35th last year, one of the great mid-major stories in the country. Drake has a game at home with UAB, top 100 team the last 3 years. They're going to Destin, where they got a chance to play LSU. Again, those LSU, Georgia Tech, and DePaul. You hope those teams take care of business in their league and can improve. But, DePaul was a second to last place team in the Big East. LSU, a second to last place team in the SEC. But LSU, as bad as they were in the SEC, were still a top 100 team. So there are opportunities there if they can take care of business. The team that is probably outside of those that is making the most hay from a scheduling standpoint, Northern Iowa. They're going to UC Irvine, top 100 team the last 3 years. They're going in the Acrisure series out in California around Thanksgiving. They're going to play Nevada, top 100 team the last 3 years. And so those are the opportunities that you have to play, and you have to play more of them. As Kevin Lehman said, you don't need to be just going to collect a check. And there are needs for these programs and financial budgetary reasons why they have to go play a big boy somewhere. Indiana State is going to Duke. Evansville is going to Purdue. There are these games you got to play, but can you get the same amount of money to maybe not go play a top 5 team in the country, go play the 35th best team in the country, who's still metrically going to be good for you, and you got a chance to go down there and win a game. And those are the opportunities teams have to take advantage of. But the main deal is just pump as many of these games onto your schedule as possible. Murray State, they got a home and home a couple years ago with SMU. So they're going down there. That's a top 50 team out of the ACC. But, for Bradley to get these home and homes with Washington State, for Drake to have them with UAB, UIC with Yale, this is what you have to do if you want to be an at-large. If that's not the goal, then just go play 300 and below, and we'll roll the dice out and see how things turn out for you once you get into Valley play. But that there are the thing right now, and this is not a damnation comment towards anybody, because most everybody's got about 3 non-conference out of their 11 scheduled. So there's a lot of work to do, but those 22 schools that I mentioned sort of at the top of this little speech, those are the teams you got to go find and find a way to get them, whether you got to go play them on a neutral floor, whether you can get them in an MTE, whether you can get them on a home and home, whatever you got to do. Those are the teams you've got to play, because you're not going to get these opportunities on neutral floors anymore against power schools where you're going to have an expectation to be able to, last year, Drake going down to Charleston, beating a Vanderbilt, beating a Miami of Florida, beating a Florida Atlantic, maybe Florida Atlantic moving forward, maybe, but the days of the Miamis and the Vanderbilts, they're like, yeah, we're not doing that anymore. We're not, because everyone at the big schools is so risk averse now. They don't want to put themselves in any position where they can get beat by somebody that it doesn't look great. It's like they're going to play 300 and below and try to blow their doors off, or they're going to go play other power schools where it doesn't hurt them if they lose, relatively speaking, from a net standpoint. So that is sort of my bowing down to the scheduling gods. That is what I am hoping we will see here in the next 2 months, as these schedules get put together, and these teams that, yeah, it might be a little bit of travel getting out to a St. Mary or a San Diego State or an Irvine, but man, right here in the Midwest, when you've got, a Memphis, a North Texas, a Dayton, UAB. I mean, like there are options there of teams that are consistently either averaging top 100 or just flat been in the top 100 the last 3 years that can really bolster these non-conference resumes. All right, soapbox, I'm off it. Thanks for listening today. I want to thank Kevin Lehman one more time for being with us here on the program. Programming note, we will not be here Monday. Happy Memorial Day to all of you. Celebrate that with your friends and family. And as always, please head on over to YouTube, search out Morning in the Valley, subscribe to the program there. Let's get it out to some more Valley loving friends. We will be back on Wednesday morning, 9 a.m. Right here, wherever you are watching us. And glad you're with us. Have a great weekend, everybody. And thanks for watching Morning in the Valley.